Welcome to the In-Betwixt and In-Between. This is Leadership Limbo, a podcast aimed at helping middle managers and their supervisors embrace the discomfort and power of leading themselves and others in the midst of it all. We blend real insight with practical tools to help you lead with self-awareness, purpose, and influence, wherever you are on your leadership journey. I'm Josh Hugo, one of your co-hosts, and joined today, as always, by my good friend and other co-host, John Clark. Good morning, John.
Yo. How are things going, my friend? How you been?
Very well, very well. And for our viewers who are seeing this on YouTube, Suzi is with us today. And good morning, Suzi. Welcome.
Good morning. Happy Friday.
Thank you. Yeah, we're recording this on a Friday today. And we'll give Suzi a full and proper introduction here in a few moments. I've been trying to, while I can, based on what's happening in the universe, schedule my Fridays like I did in college. Which
Okay.
not
Waking up.
trying to put anything if I can avoid it through the majority of the day on Fridays. I used to have a schedule. My senior year schedule was a joke. By the second semester, I was actually just part-time. I don't know if you ever knew this, John, but I was a part-time student at Notre Dame.
Okay. That's nice.
And I finished all my credits. I had two classes. I had a Tuesday class at like 8 a.m. or like 1 p.m. maybe it was, and nothing else. And then I had like a internship. And so for every year since freshman year, other than freshman year, I tried to avoid Fridays. So my Friday looks good. I got some work to do, plenty of things, but no other meetings. So
your Friday for about 20 years always was busy in school. So I wouldn't say that you kept that going. Fridays they could be chill, but a lot of times they were not. People were coming in ready to rage into the weekend. So, but that might describe your college experience too, raging into the weekend. So
Thursday nights.
Yeah.
Thursday nights was like the start of the weekend. But these days,
I have this memory, Josh, and it might be a made up one, but it's one I associate with you. I remember being at a bar in downtown South Bend sometime senior year, and I'm looking over, it was the Club Fever. I don't know if you remember this. Would you have ever gone there?
Maybe once or twice.
Because this could just be an apocryphal story that I've made up about you, but and it's nothing bad. Don't concern yourself. But I'm up on this. There's like this balcony where you can oversee. There was like a bar upstairs and there's downstairs, and there's this big dance floor. It was a Cupid Shuffle, and I remember looking down and seeing this really tall figure in the middle of everyone doing it.
Okay.
And for some reason, I remember it being you. This also could have been like Ace when we were in Ace, but
It
anyway,
could have been Ace. It might have been,
some future podcast. We'll just have Josh teach us
Do
the
the
Cupid
Cupid?
Shuffle.
I'd love that.
That's right. That's what we're gonna do. So
Yeah, that could have been me. Yeah, where people throwing money and just like back and all like, wow.
There was a line waiting to dance with you. That's what I recall.
Yeah, I have the same memory, so I'm sure it happened just exactly like that. But well, it's great to see both of you this morning. Really excited to have Suzi with us. And before we jump into our intro of Suzi today, just a reminder, download our podcast wherever you get it. Nobody reached out this week to ask for a name drop. My brother did thank me. So Zach Hugo, you again get some recognition on this podcast today. And people have noticed some shift in our music introduction. We just tried to change it up a little bit. But for those who are paying attention, listening, and engaging every week, thank you very much. And if it suits you and feels like it's something you can do, please leave us a review. We appreciate the questions and feedback you send our way. And thank you for your consistent engagement with this. But without any further ado, really excited to have Suzi. Suzi Lantz is joining us this morning. And Suzi, I don't know if you picked up on that from our conversation. I don't know if I shared this with you, but John and I go back a long way. And we shared some time together at Notre Dame and shared some time together professionally for, a long time. So we've kind of reunited this past year in this space. But thanks for kind of listening to our silly banter.
I love it. I used to run at Notre Dame. That was our start off for our cross country meet. I ran in college, and I loved Notre Dame's course because it was on a golf course, always the fastest. So we could run some epic times because there weren't any hills to get in our way. But gosh, I'm jealous. What a beautiful campus, and I'm sure a wonderful college experience. I'm glad to hear that connection.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah,
it might actually be below sea level, even though it's in the middle of the country, for all I know.
It truly could be.
Suzi, well, where did you go to college? I didn't know that you ran.
So I it was Malone College, it's now Malone University, but I went
Okay.
because Jack Hazen, he was truly one of the best collegiate cross-country coaches. He coached the Olympic 96 when my sister and I were deciding where to go to school. Fun fact, I have an identical twin sister.
Oh,
We both ran. And
okay.
so he was hands down, he had the best program, the most thoughtful. We were talking to a lot of different coaches, and his program just stood out. Tiny little, university in the middle of, well, northeast Ohio, but
Okay.
they had one of the best programs. And so we would compete against all D1 schools. We'd go to Clemson and Notre Dame, and he flew us to all our meets.
Wow.
But we were technically in the NAIA. And so then when we would start competing in our, regional and national meets, our team would do really well.
That's awesome.
He truly coached for 54 years, and in the
Amazing.
running world left such a legacy of coaches and people who went on to then run their own cross-country programs in middle school, high school, college. And I just truly, it was his leadership that brought me to Malone and really did impact a lot of the leadership lessons. So fun little transition there.
Yeah,
Nice.
that's fantastic.
That's
That's
my
really
connection
cool.
to Notre Dame. We would stay at
Yeah.
St. Mary's and then
Uh-huh.
run on your beautiful course.
Yeah. Yeah. I know the course. I think it was on our smaller part of it went through the golf course on the west side of
Mhm.
campus, if I'm not mistaken,
Yeah.
and
Yes.
I think I caught a few races there, and you were
Yeah.
running at a time when I don't think Notre Dame's program was necessarily at the top, but over the past,
Right.
like, 20 years, they've really started to incorporate
Step up.
some excellent running and
Absolutely.
runners, so
Yeah.
well, yeah, that's awesome. That's a really great kind of informal intro, and just on a formal level, for our listeners, Suzi joins us today from Ohio and is a leadership
Mhm.
consultant, executive coach, and CEO of Personal Peak Consulting, and also co-founder of Oxygen. We met the other co-founder of that, Andrew Robinson, on this podcast several months back. And there, Suzi helps organizations create tailored people development systems that actually stick. She specializes in organizational culture architecture, and we're going to talk about that today. And she works across industries to design cultures that develop people, strengthen teams, and drive performance. With a background in education and a deep commitment to human development, Suzi brings both strategic rigor and relational depth to her work. So, good morning again, Suzi. Thank you again for being here.
Absolutely. It's
Well,
fun
let's
to
build off. Yeah, I want to build off that. Tell me more about you. We got the running part. The
Yeah.
education part's another little gem
Yeah.
that I didn't know so much about. I want to kind of hear
Yeah.
about that. But yeah, tell us a bit
Absolutely.
about you and your personal and professional journey to kind of today.
Well, I will share that because running did play a massive role in what I wanted to do. I was so impacted, by my high school coaches, college coaches, that as much as when I look back now, the consistency and the day-to-day of a bell schedule in the classroom was
Yeah.
not a great fit for me because I am somebody who really loves variety. But I really wanted to make an impact in the same way those coaches and the teachers in my life had made an impact. That was there from the beginning. And so I went into education, secondary education, and I spent my early career teaching eighth grade. Josh, you
Hey,
mentioned
that's
you have an
awesome.
upcoming eighth grader. I will say, I always thought I'd teach the upper levels in the 12th grade. I was an English major, spent some time in England actually getting to connect with the poets and writers and, people who had really shaped how I see the world. But then I ended up with eighth graders and talk about a paradigm shift. They were not quite ready to unpack the gold of words, Wordsworth and Shakespeare. And yet I found something so powerful in the heart of a 13, 14-year-old, making that jump from childhood
Yeah.
to young adult adolescence.
Mhm.
It's like wet cement. And there was something about that early on that because I had opportunity to move to a upper level. And I said, you know what? There's something about eighth grade. There's something about that formative stage in a person's life that if it goes well, it goes well. And if it doesn't, you can spend a lifetime unpacking it. So that was my origin story. And
Wow.
coaching middle school, cross country, and track. My goodness, you learn how to lead some very
Totally.
frustrating followers.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
that was an entry point.
Yeah.
Because we
I
all,
want John to jump in because there
Yeah.
were two things that you said that John, I think, will absolutely relate to.
Okay.
oh, I hope I picked the right two.
Yeah,
Uh,
let's see.
See.
well, we all have, Josh, you taught eighth grade too, right? We were all middle school. And so
Yep.
because you and I did the middle school.
Way.
Yeah, we were all middle school teachers here. For some reason, in some past life, I did something not quite right, and God said, "Hey, you're going to be a middle school techer for a while,
Long
and
time, like
and a
12
principal,
years, 14
and a
years.
principal, and any effort you make to get out of that isn't going to happen." So, but no, I mean, because I think you're right. I don't know. There's so much I learned about leadership from leading adults with kids that age. Number one,
Yes.
because if you're not flexible as a middle school teacher, because even in high school, right? I think like you can get into the vein of I'm more content expert. That's kind of
They
what
don't.
matters, and I can lean into that. Not all the time. Josh probably has arguments against that as a high school administrator, but that's not going to get you where you want to go with them because there's so much about it. And I think that's an interesting correlation between what I know about oxygen and the work you all do and thinking about that. I'm reminded of a book called How Kids Succeed. This
Yeah.
author's name is slipping on my mind, but it's all about the impact that happens in that like fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth grade age, where you're
Mhm.
not just teaching kids things, you're like developing them and
Yeah.
developing their character. And I just,
Mm.
knowing what you all do at Oxygen and knowing that your thoughts on
Right.
leadership are so much about the development of people
Mhm.
versus just like the transfer of knowledge, right? And like, here's how if you do these things, you'll be a good leader. It's rather about like, no, if you have these mindsets, you'll be a leader. I think I don't know. I hear that story even in, what you have to be with eighth graders and what you have to be in
Yeah.
the leadership development space is interesting. But Josh, I don't know if I missed the other thing.
You got one out of the three actually, but the other two are just kind of fun facts. But you also were an English major and studied in
Yes,
English.
I did study in England. I was an English
Oh
major.
my
Yeah. Yeah.
gosh.
I totally agree. I thought I was going to be the guy from Dead Poets Society. And then they were like, no, he's not even that good of a teacher.
John was a good teacher, but Suzi,
Captain, my captain. You can still stand on the desk, you know?
Any Whitman. Whitman was always the signature line.
Yes.
I too can hear my barbaric yop. There we go. We'll get a yop on here. So
There you
yeah.
go.
okay. I'm sorry.
Suzi, you mentioned wet cement, and I'm curious, like how I love that image about wet cement for middle schoolers. I think tell us a little bit more right now you're not working with middle schoolers, but do you
Raised
feel like
to
that wet cement still applies? And tell us a little bit about
Oh, yeah.
what you're doing now.
Yeah. Well, I find that we all are in those stages of forming. And when I do leader intensives and go back and do life mapping with leaders,
Hmm.
you recognize how those early social experiences, life experiences, learning experiences can shape a person. And as a coach, as somebody who really wants an individual to thrive in whatever position, role that they find themselves, it's really critical at times to go back to those spaces. And I think that's where, in order to get a person back to a pliable state,
Mm.
we're all trying to survive. And so things happen to us. We all have different ways of dealing with them. One of the things that I've learned, in really understanding this is trauma happens to us all in big and small ways. There's definitely a scale. But what research shows us is it's what we do after the trauma that dictates how long it's going to take us to overcome the impact of that trauma. And so if we experience difficult things, so in middle school or in high school or even in early adolescence, and we just stuff it, just, okay, life's hard, it's tough, I can overcome it, not going to do much with this. This was tough. We just stuff it and don't share and don't have it actually, externalized and have people acknowledge what we went through. It hardens, and that traumatization actually will stay with us. That's where we become traumatized individuals.
Mhm.
That's what shows up in our leadership. When you see unhealthy practices that are almost rooted in an individual, it's not just the cause of stress or, just a hard season or they haven't gotten enough sleep or they're jet lagged coming back from the West Coast, like we were talking about earlier before the call. But when it's actually formed in them You're just like,
Yeah.
how does this leader, this isn't who they are. What happened? That curiosity to go back, to actually look at those points of pain, those points of, just life that we were not ready to experience, because that's what trauma is.
Hmm.
Something that occurs to us that we just weren't ready for. Our brains weren't ready to handle it. When we can go back to those places and honestly bring it up, have someone acknowledge it, work through it, that's the wet cement stage that
Yeah.
as adults we have opportunity to
Hmm.
recreate. And it's critical if we want to actually experience health, liberation, and just freedom in our leadership, in who we are, we have to go to those spaces. And for some, who've been fortunate to not have glaring, difficulties from way back when.
Yeah.
Although
Hmm.
I would say if it impacted you, take it seriously. Don't put a comparison on painful life experiences,
Yeah, well said.
but it is the key to health. And some leaders are so busy heading into the future, they just don't want to take the time to look back. And that wet cement stage is critical for growth.
Yeah. It's like way more important. Yeah, you gotta, even though it sucks to go through wet cement, it's
Yeah.
better than like the calcification of your
Oh
trauma,
yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
on. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's a beautiful metaphor.
Wet
I love that.
cement can be shaped.
Yeah.
You can put it into a mold. It can reform. But if it's hardened, well, this is what you get.
Yeah. Josh, can I ask a question on that? I know we got,
Yeah.
but
Oh, no, let's, yeah.
yeah, you're talking about, behaviors being pliable. I feel like a lot of my work recently has been reminding
Mhm.
leaders that the reason we look at behaviors is they're malleable in a
Mhm.
way that me just like getting at, I don't know, your personality traits in a way
Yeah.
feels a little more fixed. How do you work with people, outside of like recognizing where these moments are and, being able to shape them? How do you work with leaders and folks on recognizing that these things are pliable and they can be shifted? Because I think there are people out there that think about behavior change and they're just like, can we really change behavior? Right.
Yeah.
So I'm curious how
Yeah.
you kind of approach that with folks.
Well, I think it takes self-awareness.
Hmm.
You have to be willing to look in the mirror. You have to be willing to be honest with yourself and say, "Hey, this is who I am, and this is who I'm going to be naturally. But this is who I'd prefer. These are the behaviors I would prefer to show up with." By nature, I tend to, when I'm nervous, I'll overtalk. I'll just start rattling around. I love context. I love sharing lots of details of every part of my life. And a couple of years ago, I recognized and you'll appreciate this as an English major, the person who loves reading Dickens and, you know, Dostoevsky, who loves all of the context and how a storyline builds. I crave that in my natural life. So I would love to hear every aspect of, somebody's life. Most, I don't want to say most people, but many people I meet along the way would prefer brevity. They prefer to just give me the bullet points and not have so many questions, or vice versa when they're listening to me. That was a behavior in myself I needed to change.
Yeah.
I looked at it, and instead of saying, "Oh, Susie, you talk too much," because that's what we do often.
Yeah.
When we see behavior we want to change, we want to shame ourselves.
Hmm.
We look in the mirror and we say, "That's wrong." What I had to look at was why, when you're meeting someone or when you feel a little bit of that social anxiety, do you just rattle on?
Yeah.
Mm.
It's because I want to be known. I want somebody to understand all of me, and I want to do that with them. And that in certain situations can be very positive,
Exactly.
but I need to be able to be aware of that behavior and tendency of mine, to accept it in myself, and then harness it appropriately. And I think that's really the crux of behavior change. It's knowing who you are and not saying, "Oh, that's good, that's bad. I talk too much, I talk too little. I am really harsh with my words, or I'm really too soft with, soft spoken, or I don't know how to make decisions, or I'm too decisive." We tend
Yeah.
to do that. We swing the pendulum of who we are. But when we can look at ourselves as complex human beings, understand ourselves, accept ourselves, and then harness the behavior, just be in control of it instead of it controlling us, I think that's where behavior change truly takes root and is authentic.
Yeah. And I think there's two things I want to say. Number one, we're more alike than like Dickens and Dostoevsky. Love that. Number one, like that's my,
We should
my.
start a book club,
I
John.
know I'm feeling it. But the second one, I just want to really highlight that you said for our audience is that this is about. It's not about behavior changes. Is even maybe not the right word. I feel like it's just like behavior adaptation, right? It's like
Yeah.
to your point. There's a lot of beauty that comes from your ability to like wax on for a long time and give the detail. It's just knowing at times as a leader or whatever, there's times where I just want that to show up differently,
Right.
right? Like, how do I account for that and shift the behavior when I want to? It's about controlling
Yeah.
behavior and indexing on the strengths related to it, but knowing what the challenges can be at times. So I think
Right.
that's really beautiful.
Hmm.
Yeah. Susie, I love the root of this, and I think so much of the practice that I try to bring into the work as well is this knowledge of self. And
Mhm.
for somebody listening, and we talk about this frequently on this podcast, is there is a lot of this introspective, internal self-awareness work, but you also talk about leadership architecture.
Mhm.
And I think to me, it might mean a few different things. And frankly, it's a term that I could surmise what it means, but I'd love to hear from you how you think about that and what the relationship between this work on self,
Mhm.
this internal work, and what it means to kind of architect it, which implies not just for self, but for others.
Yes.
I'd love to hear more about what leadership architecture looks like in your world.
Yeah. Well, my journey into all of the work that I do happened over time. And it was a personal journey. I was transforming. I was learning who I truly am and the strengths, the curiosities I bring into this world that I truly believe a great career is figure out what you're curious about and keep keep pursuing that curiosity.
Mhm.
And so as I did, it was no mystery to those who have known me for a long time that I love coaching. I mean, I just love whether it's coaching an athlete, coaching a person, coaching my children. It's like I love to see raw potential and help a person overcome the obstacles.
Mm.
And so early on, the bulk of my work was coaching leaders, coaching individuals who had obstacles in their way and they wanted to overcome them. And I enjoyed it. But what I found was if that leader was in a unhealthy environment, they couldn't thrive.
Mhm.
No matter how much work, no matter how diligent, no matter how much personal transformation,
Mhm.
if they were not the CEO or the executive director or the leader calling the shots, it was really challenging for that individual to thrive, to be a leader worth following. And in fact, sometimes it would almost be detrimental to them. Because
Mm.
if they were a middle manager getting healthy and leading the right way, it exposed the fact that maybe their supervisor or the leader above them or the leaders above them weren't. And it actually it was to their detriment to be a
Mm.
healthy leader in that environment. And that I couldn't sleep with. I couldn't just sit by and do nothing. And I recognized if you don't start with the leaders at the top, if you're going to do work. Now, I'm not saying individual coaching isn't worth it. And, if you're
Right.
somebody who needs help, hands down, I'll have a coach for the rest of my life because it's so important to have that space and somebody who is truly invested in your growth. But personally, the way I'm wired, the things I'm curious about drove me to see that, we needed healthy leadership from the top down. And then I began to get curious about, well, how do you do that? How does culture actually take root and scale throughout an entire organization? And so it really became the thing I just observed and watched. And fortunately, when they're trying to the spies or counterfeit whoever is in charge of looking for counterfeit money, whatever department of government that is,
Yeah,
forget knowing the CIA, the FBI, whoever figures that out. They will spend more time looking at what is the real thing
right.
than they do at the counterfeit, because if they can see what's real and what's true and what a dollar should look like, then it's so easy to detect where it's wrong.
Mm.
And there are a couple organizations I have the privilege, and I stumbled upon them truly, it feels like sheer luck, but open doors that are so healthy, that actually have healthy culture.
Yeah.
They have invested in it year after year, and they've not just thrown away their values in order to grow or become more profitable. And Provia, it's a door and window manufacturing company, is one of those. And truly, when I began to see how culture takes root within an entire organization, it gave me just the awareness, the skills, the conception of how to bring that to other places. And it became truly what my curiosity focused on and what I've gotten the joy of spending
Yeah.
time doing. So,
Do you think you mentioned earlier, like no matter how much work an individual's doing, they're shaped by the place they're in? You
mhm.
think most places are
Oh,
like
yeah.
in a bad place, like actually not doing leaders well, or
Well,
or like, yeah,
I will say what my grandpa would say when the waitress would come to say, "How's everything?" after, our meals were served. And he said, "I don't know. I haven't had everything on the menu." And he would get a laugh. But in all honesty, it's hard for me to put a pulse on how all the organizations are doing, but I would say a good many of them struggle now in this current environment.
yeah,
I mean, it is a little bit like the Wild West with the amount of change management that needs to happen in the day to day, the pressure that leaders are under, the lack of support and transparency because social media is everywhere. And so, what used to be safe to talk about, you can't even talk and have a
right,
conversation. You can't say things without thinking they might come back to haunt you. Even when I was talking with somebody on a team I was working with this week, I was just meeting, and she had kind of tiptoed into a little bit of, "What are your thoughts on this?" And
yeah, right,
and it was so awkward, but once we realized we were more aligned on a polarizing topic, she's like, "Isn't it crazy?" She's like, "I was literally afraid to see or to
yeah,
say something with confidence because I didn't want you to
Mm.
get the wrong impression of me."
yeah,
Oof.
And so
Yeah.
I feel like leaders are struggling and leaders create the culture. There is a lot of anxiety is just permeating our organizations
yeah.
because
It's
none of us know what the future is going to hold, and that can have a big
yeah.
impact.
I feel like leaders are in this place of paralysis and they don't know how to act. Then
Mhm.
they don't act, not
Yeah,
because of like maybe they don't want to act the right way, but they don't. And
yeah,
then people below them are like, look at these idiot leaders. And so
yeah,
it's just this like terrible cycle of
right,
I'm sorry from a place of paralysis because I'm so afraid what's going to happen. And then ultimately what
right,
you end up with is people who think you're incompetent or
yeah,
unable to do the work or think they can do it better. So yeah, I hear you.
Susie, as you think about, and this is like front of mind for, I think our last podcast was getting at this concept of speaking for self differentiation. We've been
yeah,
weaving a lot of like Friedman work into
yeah,
these podcasts, Bowen family systems theory
yeah,
work into these. Um, when it comes to this current state of perhaps what I'd go as far to say is heightened emotional accommodation, that leaders feel this obligation to accommodate the emotions of people to such a degree that they're no longer speaking for themselves.
yeah,
When you think about the work that you're doing within organizations with leaders, is the solution to this, and I know the answer is going to be complex, but
yeah,
is the solution to this living more on the side of helping leaders navigate this emotionally accommodating environment with more of a scalpel sort of approach? Like, here's how you deal with, people who are going to be very skeptical about anything you say right out of the gate.
yeah,
Or are you thinking about the work from more of this machete sort of side of the table, being more of like, yes, this is the culture and the climate that we're operating in, but the way through this is to have this like ostentatiously courageous form of leadership that
mm,
might actually mean that you're going to ruffle feathers and you're going to have to stand amidst some of the backlash or I forget the word in Friedman, is like the sabotage almost that comes in response to leadership who is looking at an
mm.
anxious system and kind of piercing that veil with like very visionary, courageous leadership. Like, where do you see that I'm sure like everything, it's a pendulum of sorts and a scale. But where do
Yes.
you see that work happening in your world right now?
Yeah. So I love the metaphors of machetes.
Violence. You love violence. Is that?
Well, and honestly, as I was even sitting here thinking about it, I'm like, my approach, and again, this is my approach, my experience. I don't come first with a machete or a scalpel. I come with open arms and a listening posture, and then solid ground. What's secure? I think, and even as I've watched the leaders who make a huge impact, they don't try to have the right answers. They don't try to blaze these new innovative ideas, although they're not, lacking in innovation.
Mm-hmm.
They come into the room and they come into their leadership with this sense of secure, solid. I know who I am. I'm formulating, if it's a new problem that's occurred, it's like, it's not that they don't have any idea of what they're doing. They're formulating options, but they're listening and they have this sense of, you know what? We're going to be okay.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to solve this. We might fail, but we're going to learn and we are going to regroup. We will be okay. When leaders can lead themselves with that kind of presence and sense of secure, when they offer solid ground, even if, let's say it's like the worst thing a leader could ever happen. They get the phone call in the middle of the night and they have to bring their team together, share the bad news. They don't have to be false in their positivity. That doesn't
Mm.
go well.
No.
But the authentic sense of, hey, this is horrible. Like, this is going to be extremely challenging and difficult for our people, for us to navigate, but we can do this. Going back, resilience is formed when you actually seal in the lessons
Mm.
of the hard things. And that's why I say sometimes leaders have to go back in order to have presence in this current reality and future. It's worth it to take time to go back in your past and unmine, like mine for the stories, the gold, the places that you've just taken for granted,
Mm.
that somebody on the other side of you is like, you what? John, you what? You survived that? What did you learn? Tell me about it.
Yeah.
Because we take those things. A lot of leaders at the top, things have been hard in their life and their leadership. But guess what? They just kept rolling. They overcame it. That's why they're good leaders. But I really believe at this juncture in history, it's critical for those leaders to stop, take a little bit of time to say, who am I? How have I been formed? Where did my resiliency come from? Because it becomes the currency of a secure leader when you can offer that to your team. When you can say, yeah, this is going to be really rough. It might be rough for a while, but here's what we've overcome in the past. Here's what I know we can do now. So, let's stay calm and carry on, to quote Winston Churchill.
Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Susie. Yeah, that's
Mhm.
I think this is. I'm interested in this jumping point to back. It's up. It's forward and back a
Mhm.
bit. But you talk about Provia, and it was a
Mhm.
Provia and other
Provia.
companies you
Yeah.
worked for that really just have this solid foundation of culture and people and leadership. And without giving away any trade
Yeah.
secrets or necessarily talking about them specifically, but the broader focus. I mean, you talked about leaders here that have presence and have security and calm. Like,
Mhm.
what else is it about these organizations? Like, what would you say are the 2, 3, 4 things that
Yeah.
these places have in common in terms of how they think about culture, people, and leadership?
Yeah. Well,
Mm.
first off, it's not just, and I think one of the most important things as a people first person, it's hard for me to say this, but they have to be ready to financially invest in their people,
Yeah.
not just pretend they do.
Mhm.
It's the differentiator. When they actually staff their teams appropriately, they have the resources, they invest in development and coaching for their people, not as oh, this is like an extra benefit, like you get a couple more days off of vacation. We're going to send you to a few workshops.
Right.
This is part of your job. Developing and growth, having a strategic a strategic way to actually keep adding value to your life. And then, by default to the company, that becomes a primary focus. It's budgeted for. It's not an ancillary, oh, I guess we can send our people to that conference, but it's part of the day to day and it's built into their strategic plan. So I think that's a really big one, first. The second is they have values that everybody knows. They're not shy about their values. They're not just a poster on the wall. They are the things that show up when you interact with their people. And so, it's not hard to assess a healthy culture because you walk into it and people are showing up in their work in similar ways. And so, their values, they are the guardrails. Culture has to be intentionally created. There is also a ruthless commitment to protect the culture. So these, we always think of, companies with great cultures as these nice, ethereal, wonderful places to work. Some of the toughest, most decisive, intimidating leaders work in healthy cultures. Why? Because they aren't afraid to make hard decisions. When people are violating the culture, when people are violating their values, they're gone and everyone knows it. And that keeps everyone safe because they recognize we don't just have nice leaders.
Yeah.
We have decisive and strong leaders who are going to guard our culture and protect us from the toxicity that truly it's just immaturity or unhealth that rises up and creates that. I have not yet met a person who is genuinely hell-bent on being a bad leader and creating misery in the lives of those they lead. Not one. And yet I have met bad leaders who do create misery in the lives of those they lead. But it's not an intention. It's a byproduct that happens when people aren't, they don't have the resources to grow and become more mature in their leadership, or they're just stressed out and they have no one to help them. So,
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, John.
No, I was just gonna. I always want to really hit on for folks listening, like this idea that healthy. It goes back to the thing you said. That it's not about like cool furniture and ping pong tables and a few days off. I mean, those things are wonderful. Like, but I
sure.
think sometimes when you're in the midst of like, how do we get culture right? That's where
Yeah.
people go.
hmm
On the other side, that really healthy cultures can be created by ruthlessness, but it's ruthlessness in pursuit of like
Yeah.
protecting our values and who we are. And
Yeah.
I think sometimes people aren't, they're afraid of words like that. They're afraid of ruthless. They're afraid of aggressive, but it's all about the application of it, right?
Yeah.
Going back to our just like talk about behaviors. You can be an aggressive
Absolutely.
person. And if your
Yeah.
pursuits with your aggression are misguided, then yeah, it's going to be bad. But if your pursuits with your aggression are to get the right things right for the right people,
Yeah.
that's impactful
Yeah.
and meaningful.
It's the posture. It's the motive, honestly. There are people who are truly wired. They have a lot of decisiveness. They're a little more black and white, but if their hearts are for the people,
Hmm.
then they can, I go back to my cross country coach, Jack Hazen. He had high expectations of all of us, but he gave us all the support we needed.
Yeah.
And he would leave if you were 1 minute late. He left a teammate of mine in Chicago to find his way back home. And
Wow.
we were flying because he was late and he missed the bus from the hotel. And so the expectation was very clear, but he got the best out of all of us because he wasn't nice, but my goodness, he was kind. And all of us wanted to do our best for Coach Hazen because he set that kind of culture and he set the standard where we all knew if we were agreeing to be part of that team, that was going to be our reality. And some days we hated it. It was tough, but other days we knew, especially when we were ready for competition, those practices that were difficult actually created a space where we could bring our best. And most people, if they're being honest, they want to be the best that they can be. They want to achieve the potential that they can actually experience in their work, in their life. But it takes leaders who are willing to see the potential and then create an environment where each individual on their team can truly thrive. And that takes work.
Yeah.
Yeah, lots of good gems in all of this. One thought that comes to mind is this idea of I never knew your coach, but as you've described him, he seems to be a very principled
Yes.
leader. What is
Yeah.
the role of principles in the development work that you do with leaders? Do you find that most people have these principles that have just been
Mhm.
kind of they're in that central kind of core, but they've
Yeah.
been layered on top of by stresses and traumas, and it's a matter of peeling those back to say these principles are inside of you? Or do you sometimes feel as if they need to come from the outside to say these are some principles that could help your leadership? But like, what is the
Yeah.
relationship between principles and the development of really self-assured, confident,
Sure.
humble leaders?
Well, I think it's both and. Uh, I think there are principles that we learn, but also principles that are truly baked in to us through life. And interestingly, it is it's the key to scaling throughout an organization. Contextual scaling. When you look at the leaders who have succeeded in any industry, and you see those who are respected, those who are building great teams, the key is to figure out what are the principles that are driving them? What are the frameworks that guide their decision making? What have they learned that just is so automatic to them that it yields success? Because if you can figure that out about the leaders within a system, you actually can help design what's going to work for the whole system. But it
Mm,
takes those leaders having times of reflection. It takes those leaders working often with a coach to pull it out of them, to force them to share. And you just made an excellent decision. How? And they're like, I don't know. I knew what to do. It was like obvious. Wasn't it obvious to everyone? And I'm like, no, it was not obvious to everyone. Let's walk through the process that got you to that decision that yielded good results. When you can begin to identify the principles driving the success, goodness, that's gold. And people leave it on the table. And so it's critical to recognize, that there is not a one size fits all when it comes to leadership, but there is success in pockets all over the organization. So when you can draw from, where is John experienced success? Where's Josh experienced success? What are you doing? And then you combine it to create some of those external principles that drive the whole company. That's when you can scale healthy leader development that truly moves an entire organization forward. And so it's not just, well, this one person is our prime example of how to lead this
Right.
organization.
This is
So
the
they
archetype.
don't exist. I wish they did. It'd make it so easy. Put them in a clone, download some AI and we'd pump them out and we'd be great. Teaming and human systems are so much more complex. So you have to allow people to know themselves, to show up secure in what they bring. And when they can unpack it, and then you can put it together in a way that's distilled enough, you can scale healthy leader development for the whole system that actually works in that industry and at that organization.
mm,
And it sounds simple, but I will tell you, it is extremely time consuming. And that's why people don't do it.
yeah.
Yeah, it has to be more than like, "Hey, here's how you run this system." It has to be like, "Hey, we're
Yeah.
gonna give you access to things that help you to understand
Mhm.
yourself a bit more because
Yeah.
we don't have a profile for what you have to look like."
Yeah.
I work with an organization that provides their folks with a lot of opportunity for coaching and,
Hmm.
self-awareness tools and things like that, and, I mean, it's a big investment, I'm sure, and I'm sure a lot of
Yeah.
people in the company are like, "Why do we have all this stuff? Like, why do
Yeah.
we spend so much time on it?" But
Right.
I got this might be going back, but I don't know, I'm just stuck with this question. I wanna get your thoughts on it, Susie. You talked earlier about organizations are doing a lot of change management. Do you think that's good? Do you think spending all this time, like having change management experts and talking about change management all the time and everything requires like some big change management initiative? Is that how do you sit with that? Like, do you think that's positive? Do you think that's right that we're thinking that way? Or,
Well,
yeah,
I think truly, some people really need a plan to feel secure. And
yeah,
so, you have to know. Some people love change, like I do. I'm like, I change every day of my life. Throw me in and we'll figure it out. I don't get as much anxiety as people, some people do, but I have recognized, there's people on my team that if I change it up on them at the last minute, they want to
yeah,
quit because
Mhm.
they don't love change. They find their sense of secure with a plan. And so that's where in leadership, in organizations, you have to know your people and really think through, how do they respond to change? What takes away their sense of secure when change is on the table? Because that's where you want to invest in the change management. Again, it comes back to that presence of the leader. And sometimes, if leaders really themselves need a plan to feel a sense of security, then walking through a more formal change management development program, so they have those plays. It's like the quarterback, that different quarterbacks are going to excel in different ways. Some, they memorize every single play and
Right.
they know that play they can go back to in the moment. There are other quarterbacks, speaking NFL draft, I was watching a little bit last night. It was kind of exciting. We got some good people for the Browns.
Okay.
Draft
Good.
day is the only day of the entire year the Browns fans are like, yes,
We're there.
saying there's a chance. But I get back to my point. Certain quarterbacks in the midst of a game time decision, when they have the freedom to just see the play and make it, even if it doesn't exist in the playbook, they're going to excel. Or that might paralyze somebody. So you have to recognize what kind of leader you are. Are you just great in the moment? You'll probably not need as much formal change management development because you're a leader who just naturally adapts. If you're a different kind of leader who loves a plan and feels like when the plan is gone, you can't lead with confidence, then I do think, the tools of change management, when I walk different executives through that, gives them a sense of secure. Okay, I know what's going to happen. In a nutshell, Liz Fosslin, she's a great leadership. She draws, I don't know if you followed her at all, but she draws simple illustrations that really unpack a lot of complex leadership. I was just looking at one of her drawings this week about change management, and it was all about how you don't have to build the actual stair step for people. You can't, because it's constantly, almost daily, weekly. You go to integrate some change and something happens. You have to give them a key outcome. You have to share the vision. Where are we heading? And then be a leader who can keep navigating the journey to get there. And that, it was an amazing illustration that I think, in a nutshell, if leaders can just learn that skill, to learn how to be very clear about, here's where we're trying to get. Here's the outcome of this software integration. It might be an insane ride to get from here where we are to where we want to be. However, we will do that. And let me paint the picture of what your life will be like when we finally, as a whole system, have integrated this software, or whatever it is that leaders are navigating with change. It's just a different posture. So I do think you have to know yourself as a leader and not be afraid to ask for what you need to feel secure in your leadership.
Susie, I think that actually answered a question I was thinking of, like the piece of advice you would give to another leader. And I'm sure there's lots of advice, but that was a real strong kind of example there of advice for another leader. I'm just curious, for your own reflections, what's the piece of advice that you need to give yourself
Mm,
consistently as you're working with other leaders
yeah.
in this consultative, coaching, facilitative space? What's that advice for yourself?
Yeah.
Other than less Dickens and more Hemingway, what's the
Well, interestingly, it does come from an author, but from a wise old little sage in one of my favorite stories. It's Christopher Robin, and he's sharing with Winnie the Pooh. They're about to have a separation, and he says, you are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. And it is something, not, I don't quote that to myself daily, but the principle of it is so important for me because I'm ruthless with myself. I'm very generous with others. This was an important thing I needed to learn about myself in order to step into a sense of secure, so that I could really show up for others with a posture not self-absorbed, where I was worried about saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing or being whatever, I had to recognize how vicious my inner critic was
Mm.
and how if I left that unchecked, I wouldn't offer my best to the people that I have the privilege of coaching and working with. And so, I will be the first one to say, there are a lot of things I don't know. And I'm done pretending that I know more than I do. I'm fascinated by the knowledge that resides in every human I come in contact with. So recognizing that there are things, if that's true of how I see individuals, and I do believe you can learn something from anyone, from the 5-year-old kid waiting in line at the grocery store. Tell me about your shoes. What is that you're doing? You can learn from anybody. And when I recognized that that's how I see people, it began to hit me that, wow, that's probably how people see me.
Yeah.
And so I need to stand in my secure. I need to develop my sense of security so
Mm.
that I can actually be a consultant who has something to offer.
Mm.
That I can be a coach who isn't worried about myself, but truly wants to remove those obstacles for the executives and the leaders I coach. And it's critical. I'm honestly worthless if I don't see that in myself.
Yep.
And it's taken a lifetime. So
I appreciate that vulnerable answer. And I think it goes to one of the phrases that I really do like that I'm sure you're going to be familiar with, Susie, but you cannot give what you do not possess.
yes,
Yeah. And I think that really hits home for me as well. Yeah.
absolutely. It
John, do you
is.
honor? Oh, Susie, go ahead. I'm
No,
sorry.
no, that's a guiding principle. I think, Giant Worldwide definitely instilled that in me.
Mm.
Steve Cockram and Jeremy Kubicek, they really did make that the primary focus of their leadership tools and content, and it has had a big impact on my life and leadership as well.
I mean, it's easy to feel that even just sitting with you for these, 45 minutes or so, like just what you've done to develop that secure for
Mm,
you. And yeah, I think even just being here with you feels that way. But I just have
right.
one more question. You have talked a lot about your cross country coach, so you could mention him again, but you might have a
Yeah.
different person, but a leader who has inspired you and why.
Yes. Well, as a fellow English major, you'll
Yeah.
appreciate this, but Maya Angelou
Hmm.
is
Yeah.
someone, I read a lot of autobiographies and biographies. I'm fascinated with people. And her I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. When I read that, I mean, even the first time I read it years ago, it had an impact. But I found myself in a difficult season when I really started digging into her life and her leadership and how she showed up in this world. And there is a paradox within her leadership, in her writing, where she is full of strength and full of softness. She is both decisive and extremely inclusive. And there is just a life who experienced a lot of adversity. I mean, she was mute for a time
Yeah.
because of
Right.
the things that happened to her. And to come forth as someone who could speak and resonate such encouragement, such power, such definition to people who read her words, had the joy of knowing her and following her leadership, she made an impact. And she was a poet. I'm very drawn to poetry because if you look at it and you study it in any effect, it was the poets who always ushered in the new eras. And every generation has their poets. And by poet, I don't mean people who are necessarily writing poetry all the time, but they see the future. They're not afraid to say, "Hey, this is what is and this is what should be." And they take a stand.
Yeah.
And so she is somebody, and I encourage your listeners, if you haven't taken time, there's tons of clips on YouTube and all over. Take a little bit of time to listen to her. And
Mm.
if you have more time, read her story. It will make an impact.
Yeah. Well, first off, there's no right answer to that question, but that was the right answer to that question. So thank you for that. And two, when someday I begin my second podcast, which is just like poetry reading, I'm going to invite you
Okay.
on for that one as well. So
I've
yeah.
had an idea for lit leadership
Okay.
podcast. I'm just
Okay.
teasing, but I'm like,
Okay.
need it.
I mean, we're here for you. We're here for it. I like that.
I love the poetry answer. That's becoming something that, there's a piece of me and I'm trying my hand with expressing thoughts in that
Yeah.
way more.
Yeah.
because I do think to what you're saying is like there are sometimes ideas, concepts, and ways of thinking that just don't exist in the traditional prose.
Yeah.
David White is somebody who I've recently attached to as well, because I think there is just some kind of soothsayerness, so to speak, of how people with that gift can help us to understand the world, but also understand ourselves. So super awesome example. It's every time we ask that question, we get a new example, and that's a new one for this
That's fun.
podcast. And so, well, Suzi, I want to say a big thank you for joining us today on this Leadership
thank
Limbo
you.
podcast.
This was fun.
And yeah, it was fun for me as well. And yeah, lots of really good things for us to be thinking about around leadership architecture, but also this focus on security in oneself, the work that leaders need to do in order to catalyze organizational impact. It does begin with you internally. And so I think that's just a really wonderful message for all of us on this podcast, but for those who are listening to it as well. So thank you again. And John, I'm going to turn it to you to help close us out.
Yeah. Any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with, Suzi, before I take us out?
Never stop learning. Be a lifelong learner. Learn something every day. Be curious about the people you're with, about the things you get to do, about the problems in the world. Tackle life with curiosity, not fear. It's so much better that way.
Well said. Please check out Suzi's work. I can tell you from conversations with her and Andrew that what they're doing at Oxygen, it's got to be a dynamic team with the two of them, if you've listened to this podcast and heard both of them. So check out her work. We'll be sharing all sorts of things that came out from here, from Liz Fosslin to, we'll put the canon for Dostoevsky and Dickens on here as well. But check out our show notes for some of those things. Just thanks again to Suzi Lantz for joining us. Until next time, this has been Leadership Limbo, where we make space for the tension and tools for the journey. See you in the in-between.